Welcome to Rethinking Youth Ministry, where each week we hope to raise the bar for youth ministry by asking questions, interviewing thinkers, and having real honest conversations about what it looks like to lead the next generation. I'm CJ, and sitting around the table today, we have Crystal Chang.
Hey there.
Jamie Dickens.
What up?
And Ben Crawshaw.
CJ, you nailed that intro. That is how you start a podcast. Just absolutely flawless.
Hand motions and all.
I'm going to clap. Let's clap for CJ. CJ, getting us started. Awesome.
Well,
why is your shirt off, CJ?
It always happens on the Fridays.
I thought I was on Team Skins. Are we not? Was this not? What game are we playing here?
It's Team Pants and Team No Pants. That's what it was.
Right. That's
pants
why,
off, dance off.
I'd rather not have a shirt on than not have pants on. Jamie.
Yeah, I agree.
Good point.
Ben, it is great to have you back. This is your second podcast with us. Jamie, you're like becoming a staple here on the podcast, and we love it. So welcome back to you as well. And Crystal, as always, it's great to have you around the table. Today on Rethinking Youth Ministry, we're going to be discussing the question, what's wrong with the Rockstar student pastor mentality? Because apparently there is this thing that's that moves through the student pastor ecosystem, and it is this mentality of the rock star. But before we dive into that, is it just a youth pastor who plays the electric guitar, or what is it? What is the rock star student pastor mentality?
Well, one of two concerts I went to when I was a senior in high school, I went to see the band Silverchair, and I went to see Blind Melon. Okay.
Yeah, that's amazing.
How many you can sing it? All I can say is that my life is pretty plain. I like watching the puddles.
That was it was awkward that you both didn't know the last word.
And all I can do.
It's not awkward So yeah, you guys have probably heard, and they still play it like at CVS randomly or the grocery store. You'll hear it.
Man, every time I'm hanging there on the weekends, they're playing it.
Totally. I have 3 kids. I do hang at CVS on the weekends. But so the lead singer of Blind Melon was a guy named Shannon Hoon. So I saw that concert in Atlanta. He did one more show, then he overdosed, and so the band continued, and they tried to replace him with other people, and it just wasn't the same.
No.
Like, tell me one song Blind Melon has came out with since then. And so
I didn't know they came out with any other song.
Was Change with him?
Rain.
Yeah, Change was still under him, right?
Yeah, because I think they recorded another album that they were touring on that new album.
Was dope.
Yeah, before he passed away. So listen, here's the point: is that when Shannon Hoon was out, all of a sudden the band. They're not irrelevant because the Melonheads, their fan club, they still love it because of Shannon Hoon, but not because of anybody after that. And it was really built on this personality. So when it comes to student ministry, you have student pastors who are hired, and you're expected to do everything. You're going to work with parents. You're going to recruit volunteers. You're going to hang out with every student. You're going to speak every week. You're going to plan the events, manage the social media, put your slides together. You're also going to be involved in big church and
run a basketball league.
Yeah.
And that it's really not the fault of student pastors. It's kind of been for a long time the expectation of student pastors that you got to do everything and still look cool doing it. And all of a sudden we've created a rock star student pastor mentality.
Yeah, CJ, I had to define it just like Ben did. I mean, I just wrote it down as it's a rock star student pastor is when the ministry is built around a person, their personality and or their talent.
Which is Blind Melon was built around Shannon Hoon.
Right. And I think another way of saying it is if you look at your ministry and the biggest attractor in it is you.
Wow. Okay.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly what it is. And I think it's funny. It's easy to fall into that because it's the opposite of a couple of episodes we talked about unexpected criticism. But I think anytime you're on a stage, there's also this unexpected praise that comes from, especially when it's teenagers and you're a even moderately cool student pastor, there is this groupies who kind of follow you around and think you're awesome and want to be like you and want to look like you. It's just easy to begin to build this tribe of people that think you're awesome. And before long, you build the whole ministry around the person they think is awesome, which is you.
Yeah, and importantly, we're not saying what we're not talking about is being talented. That's not what we're targeting. We're not talking about being great or effective. We're not talking about your students loving you. Those are all great things, but that's different than being built around you. The goal and the structure of your ministry is me.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is the Rockstar mentality is this idea that somehow the ministry is kind of built around this person or this personality, and there's all these expectations to do everything and look cool doing it. There's all this praise. There's students that might want to like look like them, or I don't, some of that kind of a thing. There's a tribe of students or people that think you're awesome, and it's just kind of all of this wrapped up into one. Is that a fair summary?
It's a one-man job, and you may have an assistant or you may have a volunteer that helps you with some administrative stuff, but everything else, you consider that part of your responsibility. And then I think the more talented you are, the more success you can have as a Rockstar student pastor. But again, as Jamie said, those are separate from each other. But you can be very talented and you can build a very large, successful student ministry based on the Rockstar mentality. But how many of you listening have followed up, have followed a Rockstar student pastor in your current student ministry job? And they were the Rockstar and they left, and all of a sudden you're there and it's like a graveyard, and everybody's talking about how much they missed the person who was there before, and the numbers have dwindled. You know it when you followed up a Rockstar in your job.
It's a difference between building a ministry and just building a following. And you can build a following, but building a ministry is something that lasts beyond you. If you are not currently planning a ministry that's going to last beyond you, you might be consciously or unconsciously doing the Rockstar thing.
And the way I like to describe it, CJ, is it's building a skyscraper before you build a foundation. You think about skyscraper foundations, how deep they go and how, wide they are and how strong they are, as opposed to just going, ground level and trying to create a skyscraper and just hope it, sustains storms and winds and all of that. That's the difference. It's, as Jamie's saying, starting with the foundation of a student ministry that is bigger than you and can outlast you.
So my question is now, at this point, just to kind of poke a little bit, have any of you, Crystal, Jamie, Ben, have any of you fall into that student pastor Rockstar mentality? Have you battled that? And if you realize that was you at one point, maybe early on in your career, what did that look like?
Well, when I started in student ministry in 1998, that's all any of us knew. All any of us had were the student pastors, and some could communicate, and they'd throw the big pizza parties, back in the 90s, right. And it was like everybody would show up. Yeah, pizza blast.
So innovative.
Yes, exactly. And so there was no lead small culture. We didn't talk about small groups. When we went to events, we'd have chaperones.
Yep.
But there was not a foundational. There wasn't this idea of partnering with parents. It was very much a one person to a bunch of teenagers kind of mindset. So that's all I knew. So I just thought I came in, I had to do everything and manage everything. I had really no context for there being anything other than that.
CJ, to answer your question, I've actually been the person on the other side of that.
Yeah.
I wasn't the rock star, but I was at a church where that was sort of the expectation, was a personality-driven student ministry. And over the course of 10 years, as tends to happen, we lost about 6 student pastors. And every time one left, because the whole ministry was built around that personality, the whole ministry suffered or collapsed. And then those of us who were volunteers or chaperones or were there trying to pick up the pieces of students who were truly, truly hurt because their entire faith was attached to a person. Mm-hmm. And it caused a lot of damage.
Yeah, Jamie, I want to hear from you too, but I'm just thinking it's super easy to see this, not to derail us too much, but in large churches or in in big church, quote unquote, where you have a figurehead, a big lead pastor, and then that pastor moves on or something happens, and then the congregation kind of falls apart a little bit.
And you're like, oh, that's what that was built on.
Because that was built on that rock star pastor. Whether or not they intended to or not, or despite maybe even the best intentions. So, but going back to Jamie, have you ever battled the rockstar mentality, or maybe are you a student pastor with a rock star?
Jamie is a rock star,
rocking it out every Sunday. No, absolutely. I think especially early on. But I don't want to just live in the early on, we were all imperfect early on and now I'm perfect. Right. No, I'm not. I still am trying to find the balance, and specifically in the area of speaking. Earlier on, I was speaking too much. Why? Because I felt like I had to be up there. It had to be me. I had to be the guy communicating. And, one of the mentors of mine and my boss, Kevin Ragsdale, had been giving me the advice, you should speak not none, but speak about a third less, and it's going to free you up to build the ministry that's going to be healthy and really do what you need it to do, because it's not just speaking. It's a lot more than speaking. But the rock star in you wants to be the guy on stage, right? And so I know early on I had to learn that, because that's what I grew up seeing, right? And it's like, student pastor, he's the guy on stage. So that's what I was trying to do. But I just had to learn what real ministry looks like.
Yeah, and so for some of you who are like, oh my goodness, I didn't even know this was a problem. I thought this was actually, something to be applauded, is that I'm, trying to navigate and juggle all of these things. This is not a critique of what you're doing. For me, this is all I had seen. What my hope would be that as we have this conversation, it would be more freeing and liberating to you to understand that, hey, there can be some ways that you get other people involved, and it's good for you, and it's good for them, and it's good for you and your margin and your time with your family and your spouse. I mean, for some of you listening, it's like there needs to be time for you to go on a date with your spouse. So this is not just about like what happens in the foundation of your student ministry. It's about your personal life and not getting burnt out.
Yeah. And I think it's also helpful to know you don't have to have a specific kind of personality to be an effective student pastor.
Totally.
Some of the best and most strategic student pastors that we work with actually don't have that sort of glitzy rock star on stage personality, but they're incredible coaches for communicators. They're incredible strategists. And I think sometimes it's easy to count ourselves out because we see the other people behaving a certain way or dressing a certain way or having a following that looks a certain way. We think that we're not the ones who are effective.
Yeah, when I was in college, I was a small group leader at a student ministry that was ran by a elementary school PE teacher. And so she obviously did this on a volunteer basis, but was really great administratively, would never communicate, never be on stage, but just kept all the pieces moving, and was great at recruiting leadership. And it was fantastic. It was not a rock star mentality. I don't even know if the students, there's about 90 students there, if they even knew she was the student pastor, but it was happening successful, Crystal, to your point.
Oh yeah, and I think we've mentioned a couple of really big negatives of a rockstar ministry. One's longevity, that it depends on a person. So when that person's gone, it's gone. That's not a successful ministry. It's just successful for a season. I think another thing to realize is that you aren't enough. You can lead about how many people? 30?
I would say 30 effectively.
If it's on you. But when you make the switch to this is not about me, and I'm going to give away ministry, and I'm going to bring other men and women in, and I'm going to recruit volunteers, your ministry starts to multiply. You can't multiply in a rockstar model. You can. There have been big ministries that have brought in a rock star, and then it's all about him, and then you have that longevity issue where when he or she leaves, the ministry is gone. But like so many of us are in build phase, and like you're going to hit a ceiling quick if you're the rock star and you're the center of it all.
So what's leading youth pastors into this mentality? Because Ben, you said, well, you might have engaged in it when, in 98, because that's all you saw. But I feel like youth leaders, youth pastors are exposed to a whole lot of different models these days. It's not just the guy with a goatee and a pizza in his hand. There's a whole lot of, different models out there. And I think, student pastors are smart enough to know that there are a lot of options now. So what's leading them into this? Is it what you were talking about, Ben, just all this responsibility that's getting piled on them, more responsibilities? Or is it, Jamie, what you're talking about more is just like, it's the personality. I want to build my thing. I want to build my ministry, my brand, if you will.
Bro, it's totally both and. It's both and. It's a thing we all experience is this job is hard. It's all encompassing. It can consume your life. You have responsibilities every single day of the week. Not only do you have to do logistical things and administrative things, you have all these personal pastoral things, people calling you at all random hours, and it is overwhelming. Combine that with the fact is you look to your left and to your right, or you look on Instagram, or you look at whatever church, and you're like, well, dang, look at those guys. I mean, they're blowing up. And so you think, man, I have got to do all that. I've got to be the man. I've got to communicate. I've got to lead. I've got to inspire. And this is about me. And it's not what we would overtly say, but it starts to turn into that. That, man, I want to be as cool as him, successful as him or her. And, and so we start to like build all of it around us. And not only do our students suffer, but our family suffers, your spiritual life suffers, your quiet time disappears, your peace goes away.
Yeah, I think for some, sorry, Crystal, I think for some student pastors, this was the expectation given to them by their senior pastor when they were hired. Some of them said, hey, you're the one who's getting a salary, so why would you go delegate your responsibilities to a bunch of other people? And you have some senior pastors who came from more of kind of the older mentality in the way, ministry and student ministry was ran. And then I think, I'll just speak for myself here. It was ego. And to Jamie's point, when you look at the biggest churches, typically there's personalities that we all associate with those bigger churches. For me, when I would be at events that had student communicators on stage speaking at camps and events, they were the type of people that could build a following around themselves. And, people liked them. My students in my student ministry would listen to them and think they were awesome and want to go to a youth group where they spoke. And I thought, well, that's what I want to do. And, I want to have a following. And I don't know if I was self-aware enough to admit that I was thinking that, but in my head, that's what I wanted.
Yeah. I think it's important to note, I'm not going to name which ones, but 2 of the biggest student ministries in our country were founded by, there happen to be 2 men, but 2 men that are not upfront communicators. And
I think that's so cool.
And their names, you don't know them.
And the students,
I'm not going to name the churches so we don't get into that church and this church.
Right.
But I'm just telling you, currently, 2 of the biggest student ministries in the entire country are started by people that are not rock stars in anybody's mind. They don't even know who they are because they built great ministry and they surrounded themselves with great people. So
and they were forced to. They were forced to think foundationally because they knew they couldn't get up there every week and run the games and do the announcements and then give the talk and lead worship. And again, I think that there's probably another component, group of people who are listening that would probably right now look at all of us and say, I'm trying to build a foundation. I can't get anybody to help me with anything.
Yeah,
so I understand there's that tension. And
it's the smaller church who's like, well, I'm trying to build anything. We're talking about one of the dangers is longevity, and you're going to lose your ministry and all that if you build it up. But if for a student pastor who has 4 kids coming or 12 students coming, it's like they've got nothing else to lose. So they are just trying to build a brand or build a personality or something. Does that make sense?
Well, let me say this to that person. There's a difference between being stretched thin and asked a lot of and trying to make yourself the rock star. Those are 2 different things.
Yeah.
Trying to hold up a ministry on your back because that's what you've been asked to do and because you don't have any resources, that's heroic. That's not pride. That's not being a rock star. We're talking about something different. Yeah. We're talking about whether or not you got the resources and whether or not you got the people. Nevertheless, you're trying to build a ministry model that is built on you and your personality. I mean, you can be busy and do that, and you can also be not busy and do that. And so if you're feeling overwhelmed and like, well, bro, I got to be involved in everything. Well, yeah, you do, and you're doing an awesome job. That's not what I don't think that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah, I don't think we're talking about the guy or the girl who's saying, I want people to come alongside me. Please, please, please come alongside me and volunteer. We're talking about the one who feels a tension of, yeah, I don't know if I want as many other people in the lives of my students.
Like some of the symptoms I would say is even some of the, I bet if you are building a Rockstar deal, if you left, it might implode. People would go elsewhere. Another symptom is the people that are volunteering or working around you probably feel a little bit micromanaged, like your voice is in everywhere and everything. And you're like, well, hold on. Trust is probably a little low for you and other people. I've struggled with that before. It's not like you're a bad person. That would be another symptom. What are some other symptoms?
So I spoke one time at a student ministry, and the student pastor said, hey, it's rare for me to have somebody else here. He said, I don't give up my pulpit very often.
Major symptom.
Wow.
And I thought, okay, this is, and I saw when that student pastor left, I saw what happened in that student ministry, and it did exactly what you said. It diminished very quickly. I would say the amount of stage time, whether it's leader meetings, parent meetings, communication, if it's
Spotlight
so
time.
Dominated by you and no one else, that's a symptom.
Yeah, I ask a lot, I think I said this earlier, what's the biggest attractor in your ministry? And if it's you, that might be a sign. I think another one to ask is who are your students closest to in your ministry? And if the answer for all of them is you, you are Rockstar. Like that's what you're building.
100%.
Either that or you're just the first small group leader and y'all are just getting started. That's fine if that's the case. But if you got about more than 30 or 20 to 30, 40, and every one of them is closest to you, you're running a Rockstar ministry.
I mean, I think, CJ...
Is that too strong?
No, I think that's 100% true.
Yeah, I think a great question to ask is simply, or play out, is what would happen if I died? What would happen if I left, if I died, if, something happened that, drew me to another place? It's literally important, I think, to think through that scenario, not like your own funeral and what people would say, but like think
through,
That's
a different exercise.
What's going to happen? Like, this group of people, where are they going to go? What are they going to, and what's it practically going to look like for you?
So what we're really saying is go ahead and start contemplating your own death. Like, go ahead and just run through that.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's great, Ben. That's great. I hope.
No, but you're right. I saw a student pastor do this so well, and I was so grateful that they handled it this way. They came into our ministry as a volunteer. They started just grabbing volunteers and saying, hey, I want you to start teaching. I want you to start doing hosting. I want you to start being on stage. I want you to start being in the spotlight. And there was a team of maybe 10 or 15 people who shared the spotlight. The student pastor was up there maybe 10% of the time. But when they left, the ministry didn't fall apart and the kids didn't suffer in the way that they had in previous times when a student pastor had left. And we were all so grateful that they'd done that.
You know, the underside, one of the sinister parts of this, I don't think anyone ever intends this to happen. I think this is maybe one of the things Satan wants to do with it, not to over spiritualize, but I don't think I think it's just right spiritualizing it.
This is a Christian podcast.
Yeah, right. And that is that in a weird way, your student's faith actually becomes dependent on a person and not upon the person of Jesus Christ. Is not. I don't mean that. I mean on a pastor.
Yeah.
And if that pastor, say, stumbles and falls or leaves, all of a sudden the thing that was sustaining their faith is now like gone. And
okay, can I tell you the meanest way I've heard this said, and we can edit this out if we need to, but it was so clarifying for me. I heard a coach say, make sure you're not asking your students to ask you into their hearts.
Come on, no, put that
And
in the
I was
podcast.
like,
That needs to go.
Why would we edit that out? That's awesome.
There are many of us in here and out there that need to hear that right there.
Yeah.
Who are you trying to make Lord of their life and the center of their life? Is it you and your ministry and how cool and awesome and persuasive and eloquent you are? Or is it Jesus who is matchless and amazing and awesome and actually can take them from death to life? And we all intellectually know which one the right answer is, but what kind of ministry are you building?
And again, I understand in some areas, in some places, there's been this expectation in the church with the senior pastor. He's going to do every funeral, every wedding. He comes and visits everybody who's sick at their homes. So he's going to be the one who comes and meets with you if your kid wants to accept Jesus into their heart. So I understand that for some of us, we grew up in that mindset. So every invitation, every tough conversation, it filters through one person because that's the culture that you've seen. But Crystal, what you mentioned is interesting. Ironically, volunteer cultures, volunteer-ran student ministry already get this instinctively. Talking to a student ministry out of South Carolina, and it was one of those situations where student pastor left, then something happened. There was some I don't know if it was a moral fallout or something with another student pastor. So then they're just scrambling. They can't get anybody. So there's a girl, her mom, she's a sophomore or junior in high school. Her mom's like, well, somebody's got to do something. And so she just steps up and she starts managing people and working people and getting them into positions. And all of a sudden they're thriving even more so than they were before because it was all a one-person type ministry. And so volunteers seem to get this. There's just a different expectation when your full-time salary is to be a student pastor at a church that has 30 or more students.
Wow. But this mentality is so difficult to see in the mirror, Ben. It's so difficult, I think, to recognize, oh, maybe that guy, maybe that girl is me. That rock star is me. Now, just to recap just a little bit, but you're saying it's so hard to see in the mirror, but some of the symptoms are, what would happen if you died? What would happen to your ministry if you just disappeared or, something happened? Or, and are you micromanaging your small group leaders, I think or micromanaging in general is what Jamie was saying. Do you let other people speak often? How much time are you on stage? Like these are are you the biggest attractor of your ministry? These are some of the ways to start to see some of those things in the mirror. Are there anything else?
I have another one for you.
Okay.
If
great.
You had a volunteer or somebody on the outside speak to your students and your students were just loved that communicator and were super excited about them coming back to communicate again, would you be excited or disappointed? There is a sense of your ego that you have to check at the door in order for this to work because oh, that's great. We had a small group leader communicate and, she did okay, or he was fine, but our students were, kind of excited for me to be back on stage again. That's easy to build a foundation that way. But somebody comes in and hits a home run and your students are like, oh, when is Brian coming back to communicate again? When is Jamie going to come in and speak to us again? You're like, whoa, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Are you saying you're more excited about Jamie communicating than me communicating? Yeah. It's something that you have to be able to process.
A way to ask that is, are you committed to putting the best people on stage or the best people in influence even when it's not you? Because
that's so good.
When it's not you, does your pride well up? Does it all of a sudden, well, we're never having him back again. We're not going to let her run that. I need to run that. Even though she's the best person, bro, you're running a Rockstar ministry.
But man, that is the difference between being a personality and being a leader.
Right.
You can lead a ministry and never be the personality on stage.
And here's what I think is interesting, Crystal, is I have conversations with student pastors who say, I wish my senior pastor would develop me. I wish he or she would develop me, and whatever that looks like, whatever people are meaning when they say that. But yet, as student pastors, are you developing people? Like, instead of just complaining that, oh, my senior pastor needs to develop me into being this, massive leader that I want to be. Why don't you start the process of developing? Well, what does that mean? Well, it means you start taking chances on people who are like really green when it comes to ministry. That's how we all were when we started. It's like people took chances on us when we weren't ready for it. And so that's part of what leadership is. It's cultivating people. It's giving people an opportunity to fail, to grow, and to learn. And you have all of these future leaders sitting around you, or potential future leaders sitting around you, that we're not giving them an opportunity.
Yeah. Wow. I think when it gets down to rubber meeting the road, like practically, I think this issue is in part an internal thing.
Yeah,
like
for sure.
That happens inside of me, that I'm not the center of this. This isn't about me. Like I plant, another waters, God makes it grow, that kind of stuff, And then I think another is the strategic. So for example, I can have my heart in the right place, but then maybe accidentally build a ministry that's all around me because that's how I saw it done. And so I think when we talk about solutions or guardrails or heart checks or whatever they are, I think we got to talk in terms of both of those. Like, what am I doing to keep my heart in the right place? So I remember that who this is about, but then also what like practically on the ground kind of stuff do I need to put in place? What systems, what strategies do I need to do to ensure that the moment I step out of this, people are like, we're sad he's gone, but this ministry ain't gone. Yeah. Like it's still going. So, this is not built around him.
So what does that look like? What is the opposite of that rock star student pastor mentality? What does that really look like?
So, CJ, let me just interrupt you there because I want to ask Jamie this specific question.
You're always welcome to interrupt me, Ben.
I always do. I always do. I've proven that
whether or not you've asked or not.
So, Jamie, at Buckhead Church Student Ministry, you had a leader.
I'm going to let you finish in a minute, Ben. I'm going to let you. No, I'm kidding. I was just making
CJ,
sure.
I promise
Team Tay.
I promise you, I will stab you under this table. You had a leader under you that you developed. He went on, took another student ministry position. Yep. So for you had to battle all this stuff, like your ego, other students liking him, but you also had to have like processes to help him develop. Just talk about that a little bit.
Oh yeah, I mean, the biggest obstacle to God using you to raise up other people is your ego and your insecurity. It's like I got to be secure enough to put somebody else on stage and then celebrate when they're awesome, and in fact see that as a great thing, and even as in a weird way, a compliment to me, but that someone God's using me to invest in is actually thriving, maybe at times doing better than me. I'm like, heck yeah, come on. Like God used me to be a part of that process. That should be a celebration. God will never use you to raise up the next generation of leaders if you're insecure and you hog that stage and it's all about you and you get all upset when someone's better than you. So,
and then you work so hard to develop them, and then another church hires them.
Right.
And you're like, oh, great.
Yeah, right.
Cool, real cool.
Like, thanks. I'll take your check in the mail for training your student pastor.
Yeah, exactly.
But to answer your question about what's the opposite, I'll real quick talk about both. And I talked about the things in the heart and then the things on the ground. Like in the heart, I think you just got to fight to remember who you are and what role you have in it. It is the Holy Spirit that transforms lives and brings people alive. And literally, like what I just referenced earlier, one plants, another waters, but God makes it grow. He goes on to say, so he who plants and he who waters is what? Nothing. Nothing. It is God. It is only God who makes things grow. Only God. If you can stay there, this is going to be really easy. It's going to be really easy not to build it around you because you're like, how could I build it around me? I am nothing. I'm a planter and a waterer, and God's the one who makes it grow. So, there's that. But then let's, practically, I think the number one, and I'm not inventing this, we would all agree on it, is probably the number one thing you can do to build a ministry that lasts after you is to build it around small groups and great volunteers. The relational thing, like students need to be closer to somebody else in your ministry than they're closer to you. And if they're not, then you're either in growth phase and you're very small and we're behind you and keep going, let's get there. Yeah. Or you're building the thing around you and you need to knock it off and you need to go find some incredible men and women and go, hey students, I want you to love and get closer to them than you've ever been to me because they're going to be able to pastor you in a way that I can't pastor 60 students. It's impossible, So I would say that's a very practical thing, just right out of gate.
Well, and I love that you said that because that's something that we learned here through the phase research. When we began to research adolescent psychology, what we found was that every kid needs about 5 adult influences in their life, and you're one. And if it's all built around you, you just can't be enough even for one kid. And so you have to be humble enough to invite other influences. I know even as a small group leader, if I'm being super honest, I'm a little bit jealous when a kid tells me that they are in a Bible study with someone else or being coached by someone else. There's a part of me that's like, no, I want to be your all in all. But that's a terribly unhealthy way to think about it. And in reality, each one of the girls in my group needs 4 other people speaking into her life. And so I think I have to invite that and encourage that and help them go look for that. And student pastors have to do the same.
Yeah, I would say 2 things. I would say, number 1, to enjoy the mess. Like if you can look at the messiness of development and, pouring into other people and building a bigger foundation, it's almost like you look at it like a game. Like, when are we going to find another great voice to speak into these students' lives? When are we going to find like another small group leader? When are we going to find another person with another gift set that we get to highlight at a leader meeting? Like, it's almost like you kind of see it as a game, just that, oh, you know what, we're taking chances on these communicators, and it's just fun. It's a mess. It's so much more difficult, but you just embrace that mess. And it doesn't have to be so much I'm going to have to sacrifice and poor me and I have to be humble and give up my opportunity to speak. It's like, no, you got to get excited about it and see it like that. And I think the other thing is you're going to have to restructure some of the ways that you spend your time, and you're going to have to allocate probably more of that time towards adults than you are teenagers. Well, we all got into student ministry because we like teenagers more than adults. Like, they're more fun to hang out with. But all of a sudden you find yourself trying to recruit leaders, trying to develop talent, trying to pour into staff members or volunteer team members. And all of a sudden your time is allocated because you're giving that ministry away. Even student ministries that are getting started and are very small, if you're running one of those, even from a volunteer position, you still need to be in as much of a looking for leaders kind of point than you are just trying to scramble to get some people to show up at the bowling alley, right? You still need leaders there. You give me a student ministry of 5 students, I'm still going to want a couple of leaders there and having multiple voices in those 5 students' lives.
Man, I hope y'all just heard that. And what he's just saying is huge, that the more successful that you are in student ministry, the more time you're going to spend investing in adults and not students. And if that's not what you want to do, then be a small group leader. But if you want to be a student pastor and want to be successful, realize that means you're going to more and more and more, and eventually even hire someone just to invest in the amazing adults that are on your stage and in your rooms, pastoring the many students that God is bringing around. That is huge. Yet we should charge for that advice. That was really, 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 really good. I want to add one thing onto it. I think he alluded to it, but make sure that we're talking about not just a relational ministry model via small groups, but also what Crystal was talking about, a model that accounts for multiple voices in your students' lives. So sharing stage time. Yeah. You want to talk about another practical thing? Like, look at your calendar and ask, who am I bringing in that's not me? And if it's no one, change that. Not only is it going to give more voices to your students, it's going to give you more time.
Even for ministries that are, say, like 10, 15, 20 students.
Absolutely. That's still the best way. I get a college student that's been growing up in your church nearby. I get an adult who you have enough confidence in to teach or preach, well enough. You can work and develop them. Part of what Ben was saying, investing. But get off the stage and let somebody else up there.
Very practically speaking, my goal in a student ministry would be on the number of Sundays to be on that stage under 50%, less than 50% of the time. So under half I'm responsible for. And then I really have to work hard, especially if you're in a smaller student ministry, to be responsible for the other 51%. Who that's going to be, the time of like working with them, letting them make some mistakes, giving them feedback. Practical thing that we've done, Jamie and I have done before, is when you have like a hosting time or like game time or like MC or announcements, whatever you call it in your student ministry, you give somebody some time in places like that and positions like that. You really set them up, allow them to be in front of your students for a couple of weeks before you set them out there. Give them time. You got to be further along in advance with your planning on your outlines so that they can get notes earlier in advance. Maybe they could even do a practice talk. I'm saying especially early on when you have other communicators, because for a small group leader who's going to communicate who never has before, they're going to be so nervous. They're going to need way more time in advance to plan than you would on a week-to-week basis. So you have to really work hard on your organization to be able to empower people well, especially on the stage.
Can I speak real quick to a way I think we will give lip service to not being the rock star and yet act like it. And that's this, those of us, and I've been guilty of this, that we're in a small groups model. And a lot of the people listening to this,
for sure.
you have small groups or Sunday school or whatever. But here's how you can be on the surface committed to it, but then undermine it. And that is, you're the communicator and you always go too long and there's not enough time for small group. That's a very simple thing right there.
Ooh.
That's about you.
Yeah.
You're saying hearing me speak for 10 more minutes is not as important as you sitting in a circle with those adults that I positioned in your life. And you may say, well, I didn't mean to. But stop it. You mean not to then. And that's something I've had to tell myself. Like, well, I'm prone to talk long.
Yeah.
Well, stop.
Well, your phone has a timer.
Yeah. Right.
So.
Plan your message shorter.
As a small group leader myself, I've actually thought that before when pastors have gone over, and it's just like, I was asked to be here and told, hey, you're going to spend, I would lead middle school guys. You're going to have 20 minutes,
right?
Each week to pour into these students. And if I show up for an hour and a half or whatever it is, and I ended up with 6.5 minutes, then it's discouraging. It really is.
Here's another way. Can I give you two more ways? One way is you spend a ton of time on your message and you spend about 2 seconds on your small group questions. Mm-hmm. You are prioritizing what they need to hear from you and not the discussion they need to have with the people in their life. There's another one. Here's one more. Sorry, this is the last one.
You're good.
Is when a student comes to you with a problem or an issue or a question and you delight in answering it instead of going, hey, you know what? I would love to give you an answer. I think you need to go ask Brian, your small group leader.
Yeah.
And you're directing them towards the relationship that you know is more and needs to be more influential than even yours. If times that I do that, I have to catch myself and go, bro, this is not about you. It's not about you having all the answers and them going, oh, Pastor Jamie. No, it's about them being able to find answers and grow in a relationship with Jesus with their small group leaders that I've intentionally put there. So I try as a discipline always read, not that I won't answer, but if I do answer, I'm gonna be like, hey, let me go get your small group leader. Let's talk about this together. Mm-hmm. And then, I'll join in that conversation. But I think those are 3 ways to, that we can accidentally not put our money where our mouth is.
It seems like what we're really getting to in this conversation is
Ben.
This idea.
Bottom line it for us. Give us the nugget.
That every one of us who does a small group model or some version of that in student ministry, all of us say the right things. All of us.
Right.
Oh, small group leaders are the most important.
Yep.
Hey, you guys give it up for your small group leader. We just love small groups. This is, we use all the right words and all the right terms. But if we're going to look in the mirror and be really honest with ourselves about this conversation, we have to say, in what happens practically and functionally, both in my heart and on the floor of this student ministry, do I or do I not value small group leaders more than myself? And that's a tough question that might slap some of us in the face, but it also will be a great way for you to know what levers you need to turn to get yourself off of the rock star stage and say, okay, if I'm going to stand up and declare that, man, small group leaders, small groups are the most important thing, then I need to check everything else to see if it filters through that.
So the opposite of the rock star mentality. So what I'm gathering is keeping your stage time down. You mentioned you tried to keep yours under 50%. Are you going over your speaking time? Are you spending more time or way more time preparing for your message than your small group questions? Is your ministry built around small groups? All these kinds of things. This is what the opposite of the Rockstar student pastor.
Do you have a potential replacement that you're trying to develop? Are you looking for talent to be on stage? Are you recruiting leadership? I think those are some other questions that you should be thinking.
Also think about your brand. And I say brand intentionally. I was going to say vision, but I think brand's more than that. I don't mean to get company or business on us, but is the brand of your student ministry, is it you or is it something that God is doing there? And I think sometimes even I can walk into my own student ministry or another one and you just listen to what is the thing? What's the rallying cry? And if there is one, is it really just about how awesome the pastor is? Or is it about what we want to do in this town and in this city? And sometimes when there's an absence of a vision, there isn't one. It's probably because what it's built around is everybody loves Dave, Dave's awesome. That's what brings people to this church. Everybody freaking loves Dave. Can I say freaking? I'm sorry.
Yeah, you can say that. You get a pass.
You're fine.
One of the things I love about the fact that you just said that is part of the fun part of our job is we get to meet a lot of student pastors, and we're in a large room. Sometimes you just look for the best dressed people in the room. You look for the cool people. You look for the ones with tattoos.
Skinny jeans.
Right? You just look for the coolest people in the room, and they're the youth pastors, which is great. But there's an expiration date on that, and it doesn't mean you can't be in student ministry anymore. But there will come a day when you it isn't as easy to be culturally relevant. It isn't as easy to look cool. And if it's all built around this cool persona or this cool brand or this young, hip awesomeness, I think that's going to fade at some point.
Yes.
Have you built a foundation of young leaders who can come behind you and still be connected and relevant, but now you're leading them?
Can I get on a soapbox, and you can edit this out later if you want to, but can I get up a soapbox for just 1 second?
Sure.
I just want to talk about social media. Do you want to know the number one way you know you're a rock star? Is if you post a picture of yourself with a quote and quote yourself on Instagram.
So true.
We need to stop. We need to stinking stop that.
I would do that if I knew how to do that, but I can't figure it out.
I could be wrong, guys, and I might just be old. I mean, I'm not that old, but I could just be old. I'm gonna chalk it up to that. If you think I'm crazy, I'm crazy. I am crazy. But this guy's opinion is knock it off. You don't need to be quoting yourself unless your talk was about you. Was your talk all about you? Then quote yourself. If your talk was about Jesus, then just why don't you put the spotlight on him? I am through scrolling through random Insta and all this and seeing this sick shot of a guy on stage looking like a boss with his own name on his own Instagram, sometimes written in little cute little handwriting, but it's like Jamie Dickens, amazing quote. I'm like, bro, that is not what we're about. That soapbox
just
over.
To clarify,
and go to small group.
there are some quotes with you and I on there on Instagram, but we did not post those.
Hey, if somebody posts you, that's fine. I'm not.
I want everybody to know that I did not.
That's your
post
disclaimer.
something
But I'm
as
going
myself.
to make an account tonight with your name on it and post quote pictures
I would love
of you
it.
speaking.
Hey, no, really. If that's like.
Hey,
No,
I actually
think
really
it's fine.
like that you said
I
that.
think it's very authentic. It really is.
I don't have
that's
a problem
Rockstar
with we're at a
mindset.
camp and the camp is putting a speaker's name and their picture and quoting
That's
them.
different.
That's they're advertising what happened on their stage, and that's fine. I'm talking about me putting me up there for me, and it's me, Brian Regan, me monster. That's what I'm talking
So
about.
as we get closer to wrapping up here,
That's CJ's attempt to wrap up this podcast.
Yeah, he's like, shut up, Jamie.
no, this is great. This is great.
There goes Jamie again,
Guys,
ranting.
Rockstar.
When you have Ben and Jamie around the same table,
It's a bad day.
This is a lot to corral.
Yes.
But I can just hear or feel a student pastor who's like, I fall into all these categories and I didn't even know it. Or I've just never thought about bringing somebody else in. Or it's just like, I'm the only one. I didn't know where to go to get another student pastor. Or, just someone who's like, whoa, it sounds like you guys are talking about an ego monster. I don't think that's me, but I fall into all these categories. What would you say to that guy or girl as we wrap up? And what's their next step?
Well, for me,
I missed the question entirely. I don't understand what the question was.
don't worry about it. I'll answer it.
Okay.
We don't need you to answer it. So for me, when I
Sorry,
I want to be a rock star.
Sorry, Jamie. It was a long question.
when I realized
Nickelback reference.
when I realized that it was rock star mentality for me, and it was unintentional. So I
Right.
think for most of us, it's unintentional, and we're not trying to make demigods out of ourselves. And we realize there's another way to do things. It's relieving. My hope would be if you're hearing this and realizing this, you're like, oh, wow, thank goodness. I don't have to speak 212 times a year. I don't have to be responsible for every for the discipleship of every single student here. Yeah, there's going to take some work on the recruitment and development and communication end, but to know that this whole thing is not resting squarely on your shoulders, my goodness, that should feel like a burden was just released off of your shoulders. And I think for me too, thinking about the students in that student ministry and caring about them because I had been with them for 6 years and thinking that there was a good chance that things would just kind of continue in their lives after I left, that meant a lot to me. And it wasn't like, oh my goodness, if I leave, are all these students going to leave? It was like, no, these students are in good hands. All of that is so much more relieving. And over time, it will affect your schedule in a good way. So I think you're looking at nothing but positives, even if this has been a little bit of a wake-up call.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think there's so much power and return on giving your ministry away. And if you give your ministry away to volunteers, to other communicators, to other people's staff, empowering and developing other people, when you give it away, God multiplies it. It's just, there's so much potential and there's a massive return when you give it away.
And if you find yourself riding around in your car one day and you hear that communicator you developed is on a bigger platform than you provided for him, and you found out that that girl that when
that worship leader's now on somebody else's album.
That girl that you developed has now gotten a student ministry job at a much bigger church, and she's not giving you any credit.
That student's going to that other church down the road.
Yes.
They're a bunch of heathens anyway.
When people that you have personally taken a chance on and invested go out and get bigger opportunities than you, I want you to smile. And I want you to say, I'm so proud that they have outshined me, as opposed to being like, whoa, dude, like, what about me? Like, you just abandoned me now that you got all these big opportunities. That's a gift to be able to do that. And you should be proud of that.
That's awesome.
And know that makes you a fantastic leader.
Right.
It's not that you're failing because someone went on to do better things. In fact, you're a better leader for it. And other people watching know that. Other people watching see you investing in leaders, and it makes you look like a better leader for doing so than just being on stage all the time.
I was just hearing you say that, and I was thinking, gosh, I hope everybody listening knows this is hard. We're not talking about this because it's easy, and we're not at this table because we figured it out. No, bro, I'm at this table because I still wrestle with this. If I don't keep my heart in check, I'll start comparing. I'll start making it about me. I'll get insecure. I'll get jealous. I'll get all those kinds of things. If I don't let the Holy Spirit work in my heart, in a heartbeat, I can get there.
I'm at this table because someone at this table invested in me. I mean, Ben gave me all kinds of opportunities and feedback and coaching, and I'm so grateful for it. So this is certainly not easy.
But I told you to make sure you gave me credit for that, like on a podcast or something.
There's the required credit.
That's
we have checked that box off. It's in his contract.
I'll quote that and put that on my Instagram page later if you guys want to check that out.
But look, it's not about anyone out there feeling like they're indicted, or we're all. I mean, man, we're all doing a great work, and yet there's just going to be temptation. It's going to be hard. What we do is hard.
Yeah. And I think without this, Jamie says, his ego can get in check and all he can struggle on that side of it. For me, when I get wrapped up into this, my kids suffer because I feel this continual pull to answer and solve every problem that happens. And so that's the calling, and that's where I move. And there's less time with my kids. There's less time at home. There's less investment in my marriage, and my personal spiritual life suffers. That it just starts to creep away at this side, the personal, spiritual side for me when I'm wrapped up in this mindset.
Bro, that's so true. Some of you, I hope will just end this podcast and just pray the simple prayer. God, that verse, restore to me the joy of my salvation, because you're exhausted from the am I good enough, and am I looking across even maybe the street at another church, and trying to live up to that rock star over there, and ministry has become something you dread, and yourself has become you doubt yourself. Maybe you just need to be, God, I just want to remember the joy that I had when I got in this thing to begin with. It was just like students coming to know Jesus, and I didn't know what the heck I was doing, but I believe my God was big enough. You remember those days?
Yep.
Those were great days, weren't they? Well, we can still live in them. We gotta fight for it. Yeah. So man, that's my prayer for anyone listening to this, is just that you would stay in or rediscover the joy of your salvation that got you into this in the first place.
Well, guys, this has been an awesome conversation. And if you're listening to this, I hope it is, as hard as some of these things are to see in the mirror, I also, like Ben said a few minutes ago, I hope it's relieving, and I hope it's refreshing to realize, hey, this doesn't all need to sit on my shoulders. My ministry doesn't need a rock star, it needs a leader. Like, that's what's best for my students. So thank you guys so much for having this conversation. And thank you for listening to the Rethinking Youth Ministry podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, we would love for you to subscribe to the podcast through your Apple Podcast app. And while you're there, we would love for you to leave us a review. Let us know how we're doing and what we can do to continue to make this podcast better.
And please quote us numerous times in all of your posts.
Yeah, and post a lot of
I have headshots on my Instagram if you need some for
and pull quotes from this podcast episode, send them to Jamie, he'll post them.
Yes.
And finally, for more great resources, to check out the show notes for this episode and to learn about the Speaking to Students product that Jamie and Ben are both a part of, you can visit our website, rethinkingym.org. We'll have links to all of that there. Until next time, I'm CJ.
I'm Crystal.
This is Jamie.
I'm Ron Burgundy. Stay classy, San Diego.
And thank you for listening.